Welcome back to our IFS questions boot camp. That's what we're calling it. And we are going to continue with the 6Fs. And tell me when you can see it. Can you see it? Great. All right, so we're just going to jump right in. This is where we left off. We talked about fleshing it out. We talked about the age piece of that. Oh, let's play it so it looks a little better. Start the slideshow. Okay, how about now? You see the?
Not yet. This is starting. Okay, yeah.
Great. Okay, so this is how far we got. Why is it not letting me? 1 second. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is how far we got. So fleshing out, and we talked about. Oh goodness, it's a little buggy. Okay, we went over this. Sorry, it took me back. Okay, let's try this again.
Start over. Give some time. 10 seconds.
Yeah, just a few seconds. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are going to continue our adventure into the 6Fs. And some of you can see it. Can you see it? Yeah, great. All right. So we left off here, fleshing out. We talked about updating the age quite a bit, and I spoke to focusing and Joe Shirley's feeling work. Highly recommend those as places to flesh out, fleshing out. And so we're going to move forward. So now in the revamp version, you have how do you feel toward the part. You can see they added the flesh out piece. They moved down. How do you feel towards the part? I'll have more to say about this. I've made a video before, or in the earlier live streams. I'll add the link to that in the chapters. But where I talk quite a bit about how do you feel towards this part. I wouldn't, I'll just name it again. I wouldn't necessarily get into this with managers and firefighters unless it's obvious. If it's obvious, they're just, having a hard time relating to the protector part. But you don't even need to go there yet. You can simply go to the next step, I think, and save the how do you feel towards the part when you've got the target part of an exile. The part you're ultimately wanting to unburden and heal and update, and do the next steps, the second phase of this. Let me just speak to that a little bit. So I'm gonna jump back here, and I'm going to go to our table. All right, so tell me, Cherie, can you see the table now?
Yes.
Great. So
it's small.
So okay, I'll make it a little bit bigger. Is that
much better?
Okay. Yeah. So keep in mind, right now, all the Fs, we're getting into the 6Fs. It's this first phase where we're working with protector parts. And when you're asking how do you feel towards the part, really, we're working with all these protector parts so we can get to when you're asking how do you feel towards the exiled part, the traumatized part, the trauma memory part, the part that has that material, they feel some self-quality towards it. So I like to keep this question not here, and we'll get to this, but after you've contracted with the manager parts. And this will clarify as we go. So let's go back now to the Fs. Keynote share. Okay, can you see it now? Okay. And it blocks. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, how do you feel towards the part? You just know that's a powerful question you can ask. Yes, you can get kind of, I would say, into the protector weeds by asking clients how they feel towards protector parts. But I strongly recommend you simply move forward and go to the befriending step. And you can see that was there before. And these two steps, find out what the part wants the client to know about it and befriend it, they're essentially the same. These are essentially the same steps, in my opinion, and could be why this one disappeared. And now we just have befriend it. You're essentially witnessing the protector. We're going to talk more and we're going to get into questions where when you're working with the exile, you finally unblend all the protector parts. How are you feeling towards this part that was traumatized? Oh, I feel compassion towards it. And boom, that's your open door to witness. What does that part need you to know about itself? That's a lot of what you're doing with during this first phase with protector parts, practicing the 6F in the spirit of befriending it. But it's essentially witnessing. So these are examples from the workbook. I want to go through these because some I like, some I'm not a big fan of. So we're going to just flesh it out. All right. So what is your job? How did you get it? How old are you? How old do you think the client is? Who do you protect? What do you want the client to know? And if you didn't have to do this job, what would you rather do? I'm pretty sure all of these are presented in the workbook. You can see the title below. It's from Internal Family System Skill Training Manual by Anderson, Sweezy, and Schwartz, page 66. So, what is your job? In my mind, this is an obvious. This is just obvious. I wouldn't spend time asking this. I don't think I've ever asked this question. If you have and you found it useful, comment below and let us know about your experience. How did you get it? Okay, so this can get you prematurely into witnessing exile material. So I would hold off on this kind of thing. It's obvious whatever the part's doing right now in the present moment, that's really all you need to know. We're going to get into how you can honor how it got there without opening up what the memories are actually, what their memories actually are. So I would just wait on this. Just wait on this kind of inquiry. How old are you? This can be helpful to create a bit of unblending and more compassion. An inner critic part on paper, on face value, might seem, annoying, obnoxious, unhelpful. But when you ask a question like, how far back does this go? At what point did this part start to be this critical? How old are you? I wouldn't really ask it this way. I wouldn't say how old are you. That's a little too straightforward in my opinion. But getting the age can create more compassion. Like I mentioned a while back, the brilliant Stephen Hayes piece from ACT. We have more compassion for children than we do for who we see in the mirror. I believe I agree with them 100%. Anytime you can clarify how young these parts are, it's almost always helpful. I'll do a quick aside about personality disorders. We don't talk a lot, in my experience. The IFS community does not really even use the term personality disorders. We prefer to just talk about personality, whether it's that extremely quote unquote disordered or not, as parts that are polarized because of burdens. That said, when I've worked with clients, and I'll just put it this way because there's so much stigma around the various personality disorders, and mainly because there's an idea out there that people can't change. that type of character structure. I have seen that to not be true. All that said, what I'll say is that the most extreme personalities, and where personalities are obviously the most polarized internally, is when I'll give you an example. I'm working with someone, they're describing some younger part, like a 5-year-old part, and I'm listening to this and my heart is just breaking for this part. I can feel so much compassion. And so I ask the question, how are you feeling towards this 5-year-old who's got all this pain? And then the client comes back with, I hate it. I hate this part. And it's confusing. I'll feel my cognitive dissonance. It won't make a lot of sense. It's confusing. When people get really stuck in that kind of relating towards parts that most people would have compassion for, especially once you know a certain amount about it, that's essentially the most extreme our personality gets. And like we talked about in a previous live stream, oftentimes, oftentimes, it simply introject burdens. And so if you can identify those, clear out the introjects, all of a sudden the personality shifts dramatically, and then they have compassion for the 5-year-old part. But it's not even them hating on the 5-year-old part, it's what they acquired or were imprinted by from other people, from the environment, from society. So that's why I think it's so important to be aware of introjects and work with burdens early on. Okay, but let's keep going. So how old is the part? Can create a lot of compassion most of the time. How old do you think the client is? We touched on this earlier. I'll add a link here in the description in the chapters where you can get a little bit more complex with the age question. It's a brilliant question. And it does open up the door to finding out how young this part might be, or what other parts might be there in between you and the part you're talking to. Again, when you're still working with protector parts, I would hesitate to go here because it can just make things more complicated than they need to be. You essentially just need to get the protector parts on board with you. You want them to collaborate with you on unblending and letting more self energy from the client, from you, be relating towards the exile. So you don't have to get into all of this, but sometimes it can be helpful. Who do you protect? I love this question. That's brilliant. What happens is when you ask this question, you're working with the protector part, and you ask the part, who do you protect? On the most obvious levels, it clarifies what our ultimate target part might be. There's your exile, there's who they're protecting, but it does something else that is just so powerful. You are naming and making explicit that this protector part is protecting something, and by definition cares. That's a self-led quality. And I believe I talked about this before. This is from, I did. It's from neuroscience. I had a Naropa student share about this in class one day, where she talked about how she was working with the protector part, and she realized, oh, this protector part's protecting me because it cares. And as soon as she made that connection, she could feel the part embracing her like it was hugging her. It was such a powerful shift. Talk about being able to have a self-to-part relationship. So I think this is an excellent, very powerful question, and I love that it's in the workbook. What do you want the client to? Yes.
The last two questions are not showing up on the slide to me. I don't know why.
Oh, and my face is frozen. Goodness. All right, how about now? Oh, you're not live. All right, so just click it so that see the live next to the speaker. Click live to the left.
Oh, this?
Yeah, click that.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Sorry. Okay.
No worries. No wife's left behind. So what do you want the client to know? I wouldn't get into this. It's not important to get into this level of witnessing with protector parts, in my experience. If you disagree, please, let's have a discussion about it. Okay. If you didn't have to do this job, what would you rather do? Maybe I think this is putting the cart before the horse. You absolutely get to this question at the end of the working. If you go back to the original top table of the shorthand IFS steps, this is the last step. You're re-rolling the protector parts. I can see some value getting into this to maybe kind of plant some seeds and help the protector part kind of like gently start to loosen up and kind of step out of the role. But I think that the issue I have with asking this question so early is that there are reasons why these protector parts are in their roles. And until we work with the exiles and get the exiles to a better place, it's not fair to expect them to shift all that much, if at all. So I don't know. I again, this is one of these questions I simply don't ask. I don't get into this early. I'm trying to play devil's advocate. Maybe arguably, if it's really, really obvious, you're working with some protector parts and they're just very clearly it's leaking out. Like, I just wanted to be in theater. I want to be on stage. Great. Name it, acknowledge that. Hey, if we can work with this other part, with the part holding all this pain, it might make it easier for you to just explore theater. But I don't know. That's really the only time I would think to go there. Okay, so some more befriending. This is from, all right, there's a little bit of a sort of a secret nowadays, but there is a first edition internal family systems therapy book. That's the one I first read, and I've read the second edition. They're both excellent. And for some reason, at the end of the first edition book, there is Appendix A, and Dick lays out basically his version of my question table that we're going over. It's not really the exact same thing. Obviously, I've really fleshed out the questions you could ask, but in terms of the steps flushed out really beautifully, there it is, and it's simply out of print. So if you can get your hold of the first edition book and get a copy of Appendix A, this particular section is from page 227. It's absolutely worth getting. Yeah, it's a great supplement to what we're going over right now. Okay, so that said, he's got a few examples, and I like these. Why does it do what it does? That's a great question if necessary. Overall, I like these better. So let's see what I thought about this about 8 months ago. What does it really want for the person beneath its extreme intention statements? In my mind, this is the same as finding its unmet need, MVC. So this is Dick's way of getting a little existential with the protector part. What does it mean to you to be doing this? It can get to essentially the unmet need. What is it afraid will happen if it leaves its extreme roles? It's an excellent question. Ask it if it's necessary. It comes later in the contracting step for sure. We're going to get to that. Which other part is it polarized with? The protecting. Excuse me, I apologize. Been navigating a cough. This is the same as that other question. What is this part protecting? What is it polarized with? Again, very helpful, in my opinion. What role would it like if it no longer had to play this one? Again, ask it later. Ask this after the unburdening, in my opinion. What does it need from self or a therapist to be able to make the shift to the new role? Instead, ask what it needs so that it can unblend, relax, step back, if that's necessary. Keep it more focused on what needs to happen right now so the protector parts can unblend. I think what does it need from self or therapist to be able to make the shift to the new role? That's jumping ahead a little bit. And I'll give this question the benefit of the doubt. I marked it as yellow, not red. This can get to what the part needs, what the concern is. But the focus is not so much to get it into the new role. It's more about what does it need right now, to relax a little bit, to trust the client a little bit more. And last but not least, what burdens does it carry, and where is it stuck in the past? Where did it get these burdens? Again, I think this question is better for exiles, but it could lead to honoring the protector, why what it did was necessary. So we're going to touch on that as we get into, I think, the third version of the Fs. All right, so now we're getting into the third version of the Fs. So befriending 2.0, this is how I would do it. So name its unmet need. It's much better than asking what the need is. Sometimes they don't know, but even if they do, it feels good to have someone name it. We talked about that earlier. Honor when its role was seemingly necessary. Simply do this. This touches on all those other questions that I'm not super crazy about. And then if you ask this, like, so you what the way you frame it is, does it make sense to you why this protector part would have done what it's doing now back then? That's just one way of phrasing it. You just ask that, and I love the word, just making, does it make sense? And then if they say yes, you can cue the client, okay, well, take a moment just to honor that, just honoring that what it did then was important, helpful, seemingly necessary. And you can just do this and not get into all those other questions that could potentially go to kind of more exile work. Who do you protect? I absolutely love this question. If it's not already obvious, this will be your target part, exile, the exile part, once the protector unblends. And that's it. I would keep the befriending to this. NVC, identify the need. Does it make sense why it did what it did back then? Oh, yes, it does. Great. Take a moment just to really honor that. How's the part respond? And then if it isn't obvious, can you show us who you are protecting? Boom. There's the exile, and we're almost ready to go. Okay. So that's my, I'm going to flesh it out one last time, just as in terms of the broad step when we get to the third version of the Fs that I've put together. But that is what that's related to, what we just went over to. And then last but not least, what does the part fear? Again, I like concerns better, but there's a time and a place for everything. He changed it to fears, but I think concerns is a cleaner term. All right, so cleaning up the Fs. I just, tongue in cheek, this is what I call the Fs sometimes in the Naropa class, mainly because I just like this better. So this is the cleanest version in my experience of everything we just went over. So foreground, what parts need attention? So that's your initial curiosity. Yes, where do you feel that part in or around your body? We love that one. Focus on the felt sense. I maybe this has changed, but I don't think it has. Focusing by Eugene Gendlin should be a prerequisite to learning IFS. The term felt sense, and I think Dick got some of this from Hakomi. So we've touched on all that, but I can't emphasize that enough. It will give you a whole nother nuance and depth to how you do parts work, exploring either focusing or feeling work by Joe Shirley. Identify the needs and honor when that was important. Then we get into contracting for concerns. What are you concerned would happen if you stepped back and allowed us to work with the exile? And then after all of that, after you've unblended from the protector parts, how does the client feel towards the protected exile part? That this the last part of this is where I would focus on that question, and not just as a sidebar, but this is where you want to land. This is what you're going for. How does the client feel towards the exile? And this question towards the exile is in the service of getting through the 6Fs, getting to the other side of the 6Fs, so that we have a self to part relationship with the exile. Yeah. All right. Let's see what more. Okay, so this is the whole enchilada. I think we're close to the end, or this might be the end. This is now in the table. I put it up top underneath the. Yes, this is the end. This is the end. Fantastic. So let me show you that. We'll come back to our question table. You can see where I've placed it. Okay. Great. And so I'll zoom out a little bit. And you can see there's our very bird's eye view of the IFS steps and the core kind of theme questions. And then description of how to read the table. And then right below that, there you have everything we just went over, the 6Fs. So you've got it there. All right. Watching this not live later, we'll already know this. But we ended up putting in links to the chapters that relate to the live stream throughout the video. I'm still making my way through the ones we've done. But eventually, we're going to have that. We're going to have this completely fleshed out with little links where you can go right to the video where we left off. Okay, so now the question is, where did we leave off before we went into the 5Fs?
I put a marker.
Oh yeah, we underlined it. Okay, befriending protectors. Fantastic. And this is going to be a bit of review. So we'll just go through this relatively quickly. I'm gonna. Do you mind, Cherie, underlining that, and then we'll re-underline wherever we end up finishing. All right. So we just went over all of these. Why does it do what it does? What does it really want for the person beneath its extreme intention statements? What is it afraid will happen if it leaves its extreme role? Which other part is it polarized or protecting? I like that one. What role would it like if it no longer had to play this one? Maybe. We're definitely going to ask that one at the end. What does it need from self or the therapist to be able to make the shift to the new role? We're getting into now contracting. And what burden does it carry? Where is it stuck in the past? Where did it get these burdens? I wouldn't necessarily go there with this. You're getting into exile witnessing. I just don't find it necessary, and probably a little bit less risk to the client getting flooded yet, or having protector parts do a blowback reaction. I should speak to that. So one of the main reasons we do the 6Fs and we do all of the preliminary work with protector parts, if I scroll back up here, for this kind of phase one, is because later we don't want these protector parts, especially firefighters, coming back in between sessions, especially in acting out in firefighter behaviors, which essentially is addictions. But it could also be just extreme fight, flight, freeze, dysregulation or dissociation responses. Sometimes if we move too quickly and we bypass these protector parts and we get into witnessing, it might seem like everything went well, and really it's a bit complex, because if you can get through all of the exile steps and then check back in with the protector, which I've done many times without spending too much time in the 6Fs lands, is 6F land, then you're good. You are actually good because the protectors are now, there's nothing to be polarized with in a sense, and they can shift into new roles. But the risk you're taking is if you don't get these folks, the protector parts, fully on board before you get here, if you can't get through all of the next steps with the exiles by the end of the time that you have, you run the risk that this energy will still be a little bit of a live wire. The client will kind of stay flooded-ish with this energy from the pain from the past. And then you have the protector parts coming in to try to manage it. And again, typically firefighters. I've rarely had that happen. I had it happen, I want to say twice ever. If that does happen, let's just talk about that a little bit because it obviously could happen. It's very, very rare if you get good enough at getting through the whole enchilada, which I think is where I've been fortunate. And there was one client I'm remembering in particular where we were literally right in the middle of the witnessing. There's still a lot of energy. We ran out of time. We had to pack it up. Thank goodness she didn't have a whole bunch of firefighters waiting in the wings, to get her doing heroin again or, binging and purging again. But for that whole week until she could come in, she was feeling it. She was feeling essentially a lot of anxiety. It was work around fear of flying. And so just thinking about flying was brought up this trailhead that tapped into a lot of energy. And then that energy was connected to a completely different memory, had nothing to do with flying. We got into the memory, we got into working with it. She had a good relationship with that part and she was witnessing it, but there was still just a lot of energy there. So she essentially was hanging out, witnessing that part on an emotional channel for the whole week until she could come in. We were able to dive right back in, finish the witnessing, get through all of this, and then re-roll the protectors, and then she was fine. But that's an example of why now in IFS, I think, having become more trauma informed because of that part of our field becoming more pronounced, really, really, really emphasizes the 6Fs. And so remember that the main goal is to get the protector parts to collaborate, to be in a collaborative state of mind with you, and to unblend. It isn't to find every detail and know everything and become BFFs with the protectors. I mean, hopefully you feel close to them and there it becomes friendly, but you don't have to spend a lot of time there, unless you think doing so is going to limit the probability that there's going to be a blowback reaction. And here's the thing. I think the reason I rarely have come up against that is because if you're simply listening to the protectors, they won't let you go forward. They won't unblend. They won't step back. They won't feel trust. And so there is a built-in safety mechanism in if you're just paying attention to where the protectors are actually at and how they're actually feeling about all of this. So it's really important. If you can just stay very, very attuned to that, you'll be fine and you won't move ahead too quickly. But if you get any sense that parts have concerns, then slow your roll and just address them and do whatever success you think you need to do. And wait until there is a clear agreement. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, so now we're getting into witnessing, but I have this section as a green section. This is in the spirit of witnessing the protector parts, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't find it that necessary. But here it is, just to be thorough. How do you feel about listening? Oh, actually, I like this version of it. Okay, so how do you feel about listening to the target slash exile part for a little bit now? Let's ask all parts who judge this voice if they're willing to let you listen. This is from the workbook. I think I need to think about this a little bit because I don't use this. I don't say it in this way. How do you feel about listening to the target slash XL part for a little bit now? Let's ask all parts who judge this voice if they're willing to let you listen. Okay, I need to just rename this. This is contracted. Um, Bear with me. I'm going to just do it now. Now we're getting into contracting, which is the last step in the beginning section, in the we're working with protectors section. I'm just going to go to it. So we've got naming and identifying the parts, unblending and nurturing self to part relating, and then contracting if necessary. It's quite possible, and oftentimes if you do a good job with the befriending, the honoring, naming the needs, it's obvious, it's explicit-ish what we were wanting to do, and you don't have to contract because there aren't concerns. They get it. You just have to ask, and you're good to go. But what we're about to get into now is essentially if there are concerns and what can the contracting look like. We touched on this a little earlier, but we're going to get into it more. All right, I believe. Okay, this is where we left off. So this is actually a contracting question, a great thing to explore. How do you feel about listening to the target part exile right now for a little bit? All parts who judge this voice, if they're willing to let you listen, and then if you get a yes, it's great. You're able to move forward, and then I would ask again, how are you feeling now towards the exile, just to make sure. And then these are just some different ways of asking similar things. Are you available / able to listen to this part? What you're essentially doing with these two is flushing out, are there protector parts in the environment that we need to work with or contract with before we go to witnessing the exiles? Let's say, for example, moving on to this next contracting piece. Let's say you've worked with one or two protector parts and they have unblended and you've contracted and you've done all the things. You want to just double check, especially if you're new to this work. Are there any other parts that now have concerns about giving the target part / exile part your attention? And you check this out, you do this until there are no more concerns. That's essentially how you keep from having blowback responses later from protector parts. Okay. And so we touched on earlier contracting with protector parts, what the core concerns are for protector parts. And so I'm going to just review those because it's helpful. It's just helpful to keep that in context because now we're going to get more into what are the main concerns for exiles when you are contracting. Because when you're contracting to that step, you're working with the protective parts and the exiles. You kind of got your one foot in each arena. So you want to be mindful of that, especially if the manager parts are still saying, hey, no, we don't want to do that. And that's why you address the protector part concerns first. But let me find it up here. Okay, so here it is. All right, so just very quickly, main concerns that protector parts have is, this is around this. Maybe we didn't get into this, so I'm just going to trust the table. Trust the table. All right, so ask contracting with exiles. Ask the exile part. It's not here. All right, I'm guessing we went over it at some point. If not, I need to add it. So note to myself. But let's talk about what the main concerns for the managers would be. There are essentially two core ones. It will be more than I can handle, and or this will never end. I'm almost positive we went over that.
You said it in maybe the first or second video.
Yeah, so it's up there earlier in the table. I don't want to spend time looking for it now, but just know that's what the managers are mainly concerned about. Um, I'll put a link. I'll find where that is, and I'll put a link in the chapter so you can go back and watch that. Um, so those are the main concerns. No, we're not touching that exile. It's more than we can handle, and they'll last forever. Um, more than you can handle. You check in with them. Well, how about right now? This is one way to get to it. Right now, as we're noticing the exile, even just a little bit, is it more than you can handle, or can you hang in there with it? And almost always, when you just bring them to the present moment, they can handle it. It's more the fantasy they have about how horrible it might be that creates most of the rigidity and the pushing it away. So you just bring it into the present moment, have them check it out, and you can start reassuring the managers, what if we can get an agreement from this other part that it'll show you just as much as you can handle, and we'll pace it, and if we need to slow it down, we will. Would you be open to that if it wasn't more than you can handle, and we manage that? And once they trust that, they're like, okay, good. And then the piece around these feelings will never go away. That's usually pretty easy to clear out. It tends to be a younger part. I mean, there's two ways you can address it. One is there's that's implicit memory. Is that how it used to be? Did it used to feel like this feeling never ended? Then they're usually like, oh yeah, absolutely. Say, okay, good. Let the part know that you get it, that you get that this feeling used to not change. And it used to really seem like you'd always feel that way. And now, can you see that feelings come and go? You don't always feel it. And what if there was a way for us to work with this feeling where it could resolve, it could find closure? Would you be open to that? That's something that Dick would ask a lot. If it was possible, would you be open to letting us have a try at it? And sometimes you get kind of a cynical, well, I don't think it's possible, but if you want to try, go ahead. That's good enough. That's good enough to move forward. As long as it's genuine, as long as it's a genuine agreement. So those are the manager concerns. Here we've got the exile part. All right, so ask if the exile part can agree not to overwhelm you slash show you just as much as you can handle if you give it attention. If not, address its concern. And here are the absolute two top exile concerns I ever come across. Exile parts, and they tend to be more from the emotional body. So I talk about it in conscious heart integration. The four bodies and exiles come out of the emotional body more times than not, and managers and firefighters come more from the mental body and the physical body respectively. That's a whole nother discussion, so I'll just park that there. But the reason I'm even naming it is because it speaks to why I would say a lot of exile parts get created out of the emotional body. It's because emotions must be validated, period. I know we've touched on this, but it's just so important. I'm going to just do it very quickly. Why validate emotions? A, you can't get rid of them. It's energy that will build. If you don't work through them, they grow. We actually haven't touched on this piece, but they will go from kind of a more natural, manageable version to something that seems a lot less natural and a lot less controllable. I'll give you a couple examples, but I can make a longer video on this at some point in some channel. But Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a person who coined this. You might recognize her name as the death and dying researcher who came up with the stages of death, stages of grief, mostly around death and dying, but it can be around any loss. People have reworked that a little bit and clarified a little bit, but it's a brilliant piece of work. And what she was most known for, or most did, was she ran encounter groups where people did some really powerful, deep, intense emotional processing. So she became essentially a master of helping people midwife the difficult emotions. And keep in mind, this is at a time in the 70s. at least partially in the 70s, where things like primal scream therapy was a thing, a very popular thing, actually. And so, she's deep in the weeds in that way with people doing trauma work. And what she recognizes is that if you don't feel your fear, and I've made a broader table around this where you could even trace fear back to a sense of alertness, like its purest form would be alertness. But let's just stick with her model. You've got fear. So she would say it's a natural feeling, it's a healthy feeling, and it's essentially saying, my body isn't safe right now. No more, no less. And if we listen to our fear and simply move to a safer environment, fear goes away. Um, Now, what happens if we don't listen to our fear, or we're trapped in chronically unsafe environments and there's nothing we can do about it? That fear will build up. And then before you know it, you've got panic attacks. Which are not controllable. Ask anyone who's had one. I would still argue she calls that the unnatural version of fear. I think it's all natural. I got that again from Stephanie Small. She did not like that term, and I agree with her. Panic attacks are quite natural. They're just a much more concentrated version of fear. And so the bottom line is, if you can just be with the panic attack, let that energy move through your system, it will release, and eventually it might level down to fear, and then you're able to eventually just reclaim a sense of alertness in the present moment because you've processed wherever that panic attack energy came from. You do all this exile work, the witnessing, and the integration work. All that said, that's one example why we have to honor the fear that we feel so it doesn't build up. And then the other ones she talked about, I'll just do a really quick run through. It's such a powerful piece. Anger, healthy, simply about setting boundaries. It's just a no thank you energy. If we don't, and there's research, if people just express their boundaries, anger goes away in like 10 seconds. And for some folks, they hear that and they're like, that's absolute fantasy. There's no way anger goes away in 10 seconds. For them, it probably doesn't, and that's a sign there's a whole lot of repressed anger. And you can kind of gauge that by how long people stay angry. That can be correlated with how much anger they've repressed or have had to feel and haven't been able to really get out of their system. Anger can turn into rage. Anger controllable. You can actually express your anger in a completely calm way. People may not even know you're angry, and you just say you're no thank you, but on the inside you're feeling a little frustrated. Rage, obviously not very hidden, not very controllable. Ask anyone who's had road rage fits. And so anger to rage. Another one she talks about is sadness, unexpressed, and I love her definition of these emotions too. What's the message that it has? She very much was a spiritual person, and so was of the ilk that feelings are the language of the soul. So what was the more transpersonal message behind any emotion? For her, sadness was saying goodbye before you're ready to say goodbye, which is beautiful. I've heard another kind of short definition of grief: love that has nowhere to go. Without getting too into it, I think grief work essentially is a forced integration of love that you maybe didn't fully experience, but now whether you like it or not, and for whatever reason, maybe because somebody died, you're going to feel it, and you're going to integrate that aspect of who you are. You're essentially integrating your heart back in when you grieve. And so what happens if we don't feel that, if we don't honor that? That can create a form of depression. Eventually, the whole system just shuts down. And this is a very important distinction. Grief, tears are not depression. A lot of clients will assume if they're crying a lot that they're depressed. No, they're probably grieving, and that's super healthy, and all tears are welcomed. They've actually done studies. What's the word? They've taken tears and they have analyzed what the chemical composition is, and we're literally detoxing when we're crying. And different tears have different chemicals. So there's angry tears, there's sad tears, there's joyful tears, different chemical compositions. And sometimes your body is also just releasing on a chemical level. All that said, when people are shut down, dorsal vagal, no energy, can't get out of bed, that's depression. That's a whole different genre. And I have a whole piece around different forms of depression. I've labeled about 6 or 7 of them. Again, I can do a video on that if anyone's interested. But this is one genre of depression. This is one way to get depressed, is unresolved grief. Then she talks about jealousy. And if you trace that one back, I think before we even get jealous, it's all in the spirit of being inspired. People inspire us. Like if we're totally secure and we trust that we can also grow and learn what we want to grow and learn into, then other people who've already gotten there inspire us. But if some other judgments start to creep in, then we might start to feel jealous. But for her, that was the more natural version, along the spectrum. But if you don't act on that excitement, if you don't act on your inspiration and achieve those things and just stay jealous, that can concentrate eventually into envy, which is a whole lot more competitive and can be very mean. And then the last one she talks about is love. I'm not going to get into defining love, neither does she. But whatever you think love is, whatever form of love we're talking about, she claimed that's just another natural emotion. You want to connect with folks. But if you don't get a chance to express that, or you keep yourself from expressing that, that can build up into possessiveness. And there, with that, someone might, maybe rare for you. Someone's just nice to you. You don't know much about them. It's not a very deep connection. But now all of a sudden you're infatuated and you feel possessive. And if you have all this love to give, and it's all coming out on this person. I think most people relate to any or all of these emotions to varying degrees. We all have them. They're all natural. And the point being, going into all that, is you got to feel it to heal it. If you don't feel these emotions, I recently saw a video, Productive Peter. It's a fantastic channel. He makes these really, I'll add the link, these really concentrated, lovely videos, essentially around time management, being productive. And he just had this one piece that's brilliant. If you think about compound interest, how amazing it is to learn in your 20s that you should save 10% of your money. Hint, hint. Start at your 20s, make it a habit, put it away. If you can, max out the IRA contribution you can do, retire in 30 years. If you can do that, even if you can just start with a little bit, compound interest, Einstein said, was the most powerful force in the universe. Such a brilliant metaphor in this regard, because he said, essentially, if you're holding on to stuff, like let's say you get into an argument with your amazing wife, which probably never happens, but you stuff it. When you stuff it, it works like compound interest in a negative way. You pay a price for it more and more and more, the more you hold it. And that's what keeps psychotherapists in business. Suck it up, repression, dissociation, all that. Anyways, all that to say, you have to feel it to heal it. I'll give 2 more pieces around emotions because I think this is just so important. These I've mentioned. Gordon Neufeld talks about we do not mature intellectually. We mature emotionally. We have to feel our feelings to mature. We can keep getting frustrated and angry at the world and trying to change it, or we can have the wisdom to know the difference, serenity prayer, when this is just not changeable, out of our control. Feel the disappointment, feel the grief, and then we change from the inside out. The grief is like the most powerful, deepest emotion, I think, in some ways, around change, letting go of the attachments. And then the last one that I absolutely love, Dan Siegel, all emotions are a sign of integration. That's so genius, and especially when you weave that into doing parts work. all this witnessing we're setting up to do, as you're witnessing these parts, as you're witnessing their emotions, you're literally reintegrating them back into who you are. Um, and it's just such a core part of this work is feeling the feelings. Um, all that said, I'm noticing we're at an hour, and I do want to keep these to an hour because when I get to go back and create chapters, it just takes time. So I have to not, I don't want to fall too far behind. So I'm going to leave you with this last piece. I've mentioned, uh, let me first mark. You know what? No, we're going to finish this. All right, we're going to finish this section so that then when we get to this section, witnessing, we'll know where we left off. Okay, so bear with me. But let me wrap up the emotion piece, my emotion diatribe. Arnold Patton had a sentence that essentially, in my experience, sums up psychotherapy. It's one sentence. If you need to remember one thing about what you're doing as a psychotherapist, this is it. Feel the feeling without judgment. Whatever's in your head, clear it out. This is where we love mindfulness and all the Buddhist meditation practices that have gotten so popular. Thank you, Naropa. Clear out the mind. Don't have judgments. Be curious so that you can validate and feel the feelings. Clear mind, full heart, conscious heart integration. See what I did there? That's why I call my work what I call it. It's all baked into that one sentence. It's so brilliant. All right, so let's keep going. Being invalidated, that no, don't do it. I just explained why. And then the other main fear that exiles have is this will be my only chance because all these parts have worked so hard for all these years to repress me, just like Freud talks about, all these defense mechanisms, all in the service of what? It's too painful. It's too much. So when I'm in therapy with this wonderful Naropa therapist who has that voice that he uses, and my host being starts to relax a little bit, and he's actually getting these protector parts to step back. Ooh, this is my chance. Let's do this. Let's go for it. And if a lot of these feelings have gone from what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross would call natural to unnatural, they're just harder to control, essentially. You will get flooded. This is why the trauma-informed folks are, pointing their fingers and saying, let's be responsible. It's not necessary to flood people. That's a longer discussion. Flooding happens. It's not the end of the world. And if and when you can avoid it, of course, and it's quite possible. So, all that said, will this be your only opportunity? No. Let's make an agreement. If we, so this is how I phrase this whole thing. The invalidation piece is kind of baked into how you are always talking to parts. So can you let this part know that its feelings are valid, that you get it? Great. And can you let this part know that you're gonna come back to it as many times as it needs? What you're doing there is basically an attachment parenting, attachment bridge, is what they call it in attachment parenting. You would never just drop off your kid at preschool for the first time and say, peace out. You would let Johnny know dad is coming back in 2 hours. We're doing just half days right now. 2 hours, be right back. I love you. I'll see you very soon. We do this all the time. Talk to you later. I mentioned this earlier. We must have talked about this a little bit. All right, so invalidation, this will not be its only opportunity. As soon as the exile trusts that these are addressed, almost immediately, most of the time, the clients will feel the emotional energy settle and relax. It seems like magic at first, but you'll get used to it. So here we have, I'll go ahead and just read through this. Can you let this exile part know that its feelings are valid and or understandable? And let this part know that you will come back to it as many times as it needs to fully work through whatever it needs. The secure base. Thank you, attachment parenting. Great metaphor. That's essentially what the client is learning to be for all their parts is this kind of idealized parent that is always there, can handle all the things. And once parts trust that, they almost immediately relax. Um, Gosh, there's more I want to say. There's so much we can say about. So let's talk about it a little bit, and then we're going to wrap up. Flooding and parts like wanting to flood you. These exhale parts wanting to flood you. Almost every time, if that's in play, it's actually because there is a protector part judging it or trying to actively resist it, which again is why it's so important. If you can do the 6Fs fully enough, if you can do part one fully enough and get all the managers on board, and the client truly feels compassion or curiosity or at least neutrality towards the exiled parts, the parts don't need to flood and the parts don't want to flood. So if that's happening, or if it seems like that's a potential, it's usually a signal that there's still protector parts in the bandwidth. And so you want to maybe pivot and feel out what's going on there and clean that up a bit. And then we'll end after this. Dick does talk about how sometimes exiles just need to take you over to really, really have you get what they went through. Like it's a deep, deep type of witnessing. That's rare, but it's completely possible. It's clients are capable of this. They've already been through it. And really the key is as long as they're okay with it and relating to it in the right way, nothing about that is traumatic. That's the whole thing about re-traumatizing clients. I think that's such a rare thing and involves therapists like actively harming and judging or doing things that they shouldn't be doing, being too directive. In IFS, this is all the contracting is your baked in mechanism to make sure that the client can hang in there with it and tolerate it. And there's nothing re-traumatizing about reintegrating things or feeling feelings that need to be felt. And we have just our field has a history more in different pockets like CBT and behaviorism of really bypassing and trying to invalidate, like feeding into the main concerns. That is not our role as psychotherapists, and I feel really strongly about it. So feelings are natural. Clients can hang in there with it. Gosh, I can go on and on, obviously. I'm going to say one last piece. So let's just say worst case scenario, you believe all this, but the client's still freaking out. At a bare minimum, and this is why I'm going into all of this, it's so important that you are not freaking out, that your parts are not taking over and stressed out and anxious about what's coming up for the client. We have to be skilled enough, experienced enough, practiced enough where we know we can handle it. Everything I was describing about the secure base, like that's our role. So I talk about emotions the way that I do to try to help therapists trust emotions more and know themselves that if at minimum, like we talked about a while back, if just one person can maintain contact with you, you can work through just about anything. And so if the client can't quite do it yet because they're still blended with parts, that's your role. Can you maintain contact? Can you trust their process? Can you see their inherent wholeness and inherent capacity to heal? And if you can do that, they'll eventually get there and be able to unblend and have self-relationship and process whatever they need to process. Emotions are not the enemy. Okay. I'll park it there.
Like and subscribe.
Oh, like and subscribe is my least favorite part of any of this, but like and subscribe, por favor. Oh, and I figured out how to add the links. So for you new people, saying all this, it's all dated. Like you're watching this, probably most people, and it's like, oh, it's happened. He doesn't need to talk about how it's happening. But I will say just one little pitch. If we get to, I hate doing this, but here's the practical reality of it. If we get to 1,000 people, I've learned in creating the chapters that there's a function I'm allowed to do where I can then add links that are external to YouTube. And if you haven't noticed, I am a resource junkie. I have a document with so many resources. After every supervision group, I email folks all the resources I alluded to. If I have that superpower in these videos, I can add all sorts of fun links to sites that are off of YouTube and make this that much better of a resource. So all I want for Christmas is 1,000 subscribers. That's just so we can make this more functional. All right. Have a great week and hope to see you next week. If you made it live, thank you so much. It's great to have you.